Welcome to the In Pursuit podcast by Pathfinder. My name is Dion Garrett. I am your host, and this is a podcast for people who, like me, are all about trying to take hold of more of the life that God has in mind for you. And today I'm joined by special guest, Dr. Amy Pfeiffer. Welcome.
Nice to be here. Thanks.
I say Dr. Pfeiffer. Doctor can mean lots of things. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what Dr. Pfeiffer means in your world?
Yeah, so I'm a clinical psychologist. I have a doctorate in psychology, so not a medical doctor. Don't prescribe meds. But my degree is a PsyD. So some people who are psychologists have a PhD. A PsyD is another doctoral degree in psychology. So that's my degree.
I didn't even know that. I didn't know that until right now. That's cool.
Yeah.
And before that, one of the things that I think is interesting about you is before that you have some other degrees. Why don't you tell us?
I do. Okay, so I did an undergrad degree in psychology. That was just because I thought psychology was interesting and I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do with that. Ended up going to grad school and doing. So I have 2 master's degrees. That's in clinical psych and then Christian theology.
Yeah.
That was a master of arts in historical and systematic theology was the name of the degree. So it was looking at both the history of the development of Christian theology as well as a systematic approach to studying theology. So sort of topic by topic. Which is a lot to cram into one master's degree.
Yeah. What led you to that? Because you kind of started psychology and then
it was all at the same
doctorate.
time.
Yeah.
Right. So I chose to go to grad school at Wheaton College. They had a doctorate, the PsyD program, doctorate in psychology, that integrated theology classes into the psychology doctorate. So there's at the time, I don't know how many there are now. At the time, there was only like 5, about a handful of schools in the country that did it that way at the doctoral level. Like Biola, Fuller, places like that have this. So the doctorate in psychology already integrated we took classes from some of the theology department at Wheaton. So there was already that built in. And then I decided to some of us did, add on additional classes and complete a full master's in theology.
Okay.
Yeah. But everybody that I was in school with was there.
Because why not? I mean,
studying
working on a doctorate was not enough work.
Well, exactly. Right. And the master's in clinical psychology was master's along the way kind of thing. So you start the doctorate program with a bachelor's degree. You get a master's a couple years into it, and then you go on to complete the doctorate. And then I threw in another master's degree. So that's the background there.
Yeah.
And that was because, so I said I did a bachelor's degree in psychology, not really knowing what I was going to do. I kind of thought at that time in my life that I would go into church ministry, and I kind of thought I would do seminary if I was going to do any grad school.
Yeah.
Maybe an MDiv. The languages draw me, although I still have never been able to study them. And at this point, I'm like, fine to give that up, but I'm not going to do another thing. But that is what I thought that I was going to do. So when I was doing my bachelor's degree, professors would say things like, if you're going to go on to do grad school in psychology, you need to, participate in a lab and do all these things. And I would kind of tune out like, no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
That's not for me. But then I did some church ministry experiences, internships, while I was in college. So some youth ministry stuff, some college ministry stuff. And during that process, several things happened. One is I figured out that a lot of the administrative side of things, that so much of that work is administrative. And that wasn't necessarily drawing me.
Like for you, it was more about the connection and the relational?
What I noticed exactly was it was the one-on-one stuff when people would come to me and be like, hey, I've got this going on, or can you talk to me about that? Those are the things that I felt more engaged in. And I felt like, oh, this lights me up a little more, or I care about this more than I care about scheduling and setting up chairs and, all the things that it takes to make an organization work. Simultaneously, I was a female in a setting that where some limitations started to really show. Like as a woman in this, I can't really make a full profession out of this the way that I would envision wanting to do that, or just coming up against some opposition. Like she shouldn't be teaching. She shouldn't be teaching here in this church. We're in a church, and she shouldn't be doing this. And it just felt like, man, I don't know that this is for me. I don't want to fight that battle my whole career. And so that was the what was happening while I was in college that made me think, I don't know about seminary, maybe not. And then, so I'm just diving right into my whole thing here. Yeah. The family background was that I grew up in church ministry. So my dad was on staff with, he did youth ministry, he did college ministry and music ministry kind of stuff in small churches growing up. And then I was in one from the time I was born. We stayed in one spot. So I grew up, like, church ministry is just sort of in my blood. Yeah. It's like I have a heart for it. I understand the process and I like it, it's like, so that was the background. Did that psychology bachelor's, and then we had a family crisis happen that led me into a counseling office for the first time as a client.
Oh, okay.
And so even though I already had a degree in psychology, I had no experience going to therapy. But I did at that point, and I found it so practically useful. Yeah. I don't know what my idea of it had been before that.
Well, gosh, in the 70s, 80s, the shtick about therapy of laying on a couch and, looking up and asking you all kinds of questions about your relationship with your mother, esoteric.
Yeah, kind of mysterious. What are they thinking? I don't know.
Yeah, and you leave and no one answers any questions and you're just like, okay, why is this helpful?
Yeah. So I remember
that was not your experience of...
No, it wasn't. And I remember being surprised by, this is really practical, just really helpful. So I would have been about 22 at the time. And I remember one exercise that she had me do was, okay, this week, at the end of the day, write down any times today that you felt guilt or shame. What I started to understand is that I didn't know how to know what I was feeling. Like I didn't know how to name my feelings. I didn't know what I was experiencing emotionally. So just starting with something that specific, let's just narrow it down to these two, guilt and shame. When you feel those in the daytime, write it down at night. And that started to open that door for me of going, I have a lot to learn about how I function. I have a lot of growing to do. And there's practical ways to get there. Somebody can walk me through this.
What's interesting, as you were talking earlier, and I love to hear people's vocational path of how they end up where they end up, because we have this view when we're kids, you ask a little kid what they're going to be and they should know, and that we're going to go to college knowing we're going to do the thing and we're going to get out and do the thing. And that it never works that way. It's always a little, or it seldom works that way. But one of the things that you said was just kind of noticing where the energy or the passion was. And when I hear people talk that way, like, there's a little part of me that is going, I don't know if I even fully know what makes me come alive vocationally. And so when you said that, I was like, that's really interesting. You must be pretty, as a young woman, you must have been pretty astute about what your passions were and, like, aware of what's going on inside of you to be like, this is the part that I like. I don't like this part. Because for me, I think I'm a little more oblivious to that sometimes. I don't know. So then to hear you say,
I didn't
on the
know
other
my
side,
feelings
but I don't
well.
really know my other feelings. So just more about that.
Yeah, that's interesting. And honestly, it might have been some bit of like a codependent kind of impulse of like caretaking. People come to me. I feel good when I help them out. Or there might have been some of that because I in my adulthood had to work through some codependent tendencies too, of learning that it's not my job to fix everybody. So that might have been part of that.
Yeah, which is like almost you have to have that kind of codependency almost as a prerequisite for ministry.
Yeah,
a lot of times you're like, you don't want to fix everyone else's problems and carry them myself. Yes, I do. Okay, you'd be great for ministry.
Right,
like,
or as a therapist, either one.
Yeah.
So I knew some parts of myself, but not fully. Yeah, that is interesting.
Well, pause here for just a second because I'll introduce, for anyone who's like, okay, where's this going? I'll introduce, we're going to talk about maybe a few things today, but one of the things we want to talk about is something that you and I have had discussions about over the last couple of years. And I don't exactly remember, I don't know if you're someone who really like called out this issue. And the issue is dichotomous or binary kind of thinking as it relates to faith, spirituality, and mental health and all. And so I don't know exactly if I was hearing about it somewhere else, but you and I have had conversations about it. And I've learned a lot from you and have wrestled with some of this through you and your position as a therapist and a theologian puts you in a really interesting place to talk about, hey, this human thing that we do to think in terms of
all or nothing.
Yeah. So say more about dichotomous thinking, or how you define that.
Yeah, dichotomous thinking or categorical thinking. This is when you're thinking in all or nothing terms. It's this or that, right or wrong, good or bad, all or nothing. So this is something that we've never had a very in-depth conversation about this because it's something that I just sort of notice in bits and pieces. It's kind of pattern recognition over the course of 20 years or something that probably why I started thinking about it so much is that in psychology, we talk about recognizing the way that we think and how that impacts our emotions or our mental state. And there are certain ways of thinking. It's not about the content of what you're thinking. It's about the process. Certain ways of thinking that can make you more anxious, can make you more depressed. So one of those, and we call those cognitive distortions or thinking errors. One of those is dichotomous thinking, all or nothing. So if you're if you have a way of thinking where everything is all or nothing, well then of course everything's going to feel worse than it maybe is in reality. If it's slightly bad, you think it's all bad.
Yeah.
That's going to make you feel worse in the world. So when I came to understand, okay, this is one way of thinking that can make you more anxious, make you more depressed. That became just part of how I understand human thinking. And then I started to recognize in the world, there are so many times that all or nothing thinking is used. And as a psychologist, I'm going, well, wait a minute, maybe this is not so helpful. I grew up also in a context that was pretty conservative and that valued black and white thinking.
Yeah.
You know, there is good and evil. There's truth and untruth, or there's...
And it's one or the other.
Yeah, or
it's
there,
or
you
that.
know,
Yeah.
And so I started to go, well, oh, maybe what we know from psychology could be helpful to inform how we think theologically. And I know some people wouldn't agree with that. They might say, no, it should only go the other direction. But for me, I think the interdisciplinary pursuit is what's important to me, is what I think is fun, is how can each of these disciplines inform the other one?
Yeah.
And I think for me, more it's leaning on the how can psychology influence theology and church practice. I think that's fun. So I go, okay, if all or nothing thinking oftentimes leads us to be more anxious or depressed, then is it playing out when we use it in other ways? Is that maybe not the most helpful way to think? And I want to give a caveat too, that there's a place for all or nothing thinking.
Yeah.
It's helpful in a crisis when you need to make quick decisions about safety and danger. It's helpful for immature thinking, like when my kids are little and I would, you tell the little kid, don't touch the stove. It's bad to touch the stove.
Yeah.
And you don't go into the nuances
all the occasions of
right.
It's
just like as they
for 2 hours.
Yeah, exactly. As they grow older, then you can introduce the nuances.
Yeah.
Because they can handle it. But there is a place for all or nothing thinking. But maybe not as frequently as we tend to use it. So then I start looking around and questioning, or as things come up, I go, oh, there it is again. There it is again. And I'm wondering, is it holding us back? Is it a sign of immaturity in our theology or our spirituality if we're holding too tightly to all or nothing? And perhaps that's an area where God has a lot more for us if we're willing to grow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of probably specific examples, and maybe we'll dive into some of those about just like some of the topics, theological topics, the loci of systematic theologies that are very tend to be defined in very dichotomous ways, and maybe we can dive into some of that later. As you were, and I think we've discussed this, that one of the readings of Genesis, and for those of you who know Genesis and the Garden of Eden, and there's two trees, there's the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And, there's lots of different understandings of, okay, so what was it about the nature of God saying, don't eat from this tree, first of all, don't eat from the fruit of the tree, the knowledge of good and evil, or you'll die. What's the nature about the prohibition? Why is the knowledge of good and evil something that leads to death? Why were the first humans tempted to go after that anyway? What were the consequences? Because if they didn't die, then like just trying to piece together all of the,
what was that all about?
What is this all about? And
Right.
one of the ways to think about that, there are lots of different ways to explain it, and I would never. Maybe this is me not practicing dichotomous thinking. I would never say like this is the one way to understand Genesis, and I think actually that's somewhere I've come along in my own theology, especially of Genesis 1 through 11, that are highly, they're rich, they're poetic in nature, and like I've as a younger person looking for the interpretation. And now I'm like, I think maybe God's point in this is not to just have one interpretation. I think there's actually a lot of meaning we're supposed to draw from this. And if we just look for the one lesson or
we might
moral,
miss a lot.
We are missing a lot.
Right.
So it doesn't mean anything. It means a lot of things.
Even more.
And so let's like keep mining for meaning. But anyway, I'm belaboring the point. One of the understandings of that is this temptation, that the temptation for humans to label things good or evil.
Yes.
It's so strong. It's such a strong draw. And God is like, don't do that.
Yeah.
Like, it's not going to be good for you.
It's not good for you.
To try to label this good and this evil, and
Right.
to try to constantly be dividing the world into good and evil is actually something that will lead to death.
Yes.
It's not life-giving. It's not whole.
Yeah.
And I find that really interesting. Again, I don't know if that's...
Well, I do too. And I remember, was it last summer or something, you preached a sermon and you talked about that in there. You mentioned that. I don't even know what the sermon topic was, but you mentioned that.
Yeah.
I know. Because I later that day said, Dion, where'd you read that? Or did you read that somewhere? Who said this? Because something clicked in me when you said that, and you were like, no, I actually it came to me this morning.
Right. Yeah. It wasn't in my notes.
No,
I don't think. It was not in my notes.
I
I
was
was
like,
just kind of something I just said off the cuff.
Yeah. And I said to you, like, I needed that. Maybe that was for me that came to you this morning, because I needed that. Because, like I said, this concept is bouncing around in my mind all the time, and it feels like it has no anchor point. Yeah. Or no, like, okay, so I recognize this pattern in the world, but what does that mean for anything? And so that interpretation of the garden situation was like, here's an anchor point. This is very significant. So I loved that you said that. And yes. And so since then, that makes even more sense. It's like the knowledge of good and evil. It's not like good and evil don't necessarily exist, but it's like to think that we can know what's good and what's evil. That's the problem. And again, I can hear some people cringing, like, I'm not saying we just give up everything, but like there's a sense of safety we look for in knowing. We want to feel safe by knowing what the rules are, knowing how to categorize things.
Yes.
And God is saying the safety comes in staying close to me, not in you knowing all the answers.
Yeah, which is like, everyone can just sit with that for a minute, because that's really, really deep, and I think that's really mature theology. And I think even when we say mature, you talked about children, and I think if I could critique what's happened in American Christianity, Western Christianity, I don't think it's that we've been wrong about a bunch of stuff. I just think we've declared that we're grown up too soon, or that we're done.
Yeah.
Like we haven't kept maturing. And so it's not saying that anything about American Christianity is wrong. it just we haven't continued to grow in our faith. We got to some point where we go, I get it, I understand it. I know all the answers now, and I'm staying here, and we get to this plateau kind of place. So what you just said, I think, is a really rich way to understand what it means to be in a faith relationship with God and what it means to walk with God. I will say, I think in support of just the premise here, that one of the great mysteries of life, and I think most people, even especially people of faith, but everyone will acknowledge this, that one of the great mysteries of life is something happens to me, and I'm immediately trying to define whether that thing is good or bad. And I'm trying to give it a label, and I'm trying to sort it out. And maybe I'm convinced it's bad, and I'm saying, God, why me? Why are you doing this to me? This is so terrible. I thought you loved me. And I even have a crisis of faith about how a good and loving God can allow me to experience something so bad. But in the end of the story, another chapter later even, I may look back at that and go, that felt really bad. And I thought it was bad. It turns out God did something good. And I would look back at that and go, whatever that was bad or good, I don't know what can happen or what I can say about it, but man, that was good. And so I think the way some might understand this conversation is there is no good or evil. It's all relative. And I think God ultimately knows what good and evil is. I don't think we really know it, or we can't always know it, or we certainly can't label it, or we don't get to decide in the end what the effect of something will be.
Or maybe when it's more extreme, it's easier for us to be more accurate at labeling it. You know, you see examples of extreme evil in the world, and you're like, okay, that one feels
that feels
pretty clear.
Yeah.
Or extreme good, you know, someone who expresses immense kindness when it's not even demanded, or, you know, you can look at some things and just go like, okay, that's good, or that's evil. But a lot of things are in the middle, and where it's in the middle and you don't know the end of the story yet, or, you know, any of that, it just, I think it.
So how does this play out? And maybe this specific issue doesn't play out in your personal story, but we were talking a minute ago about being this young college graduate, going to therapy, realizing you don't understand your emotions very well, being given the assignment that you need to kind of like diagram or record when you're experiencing guilt and shame. And you go through this learning experience. Like, how does this kind of, usually most passion things show up, they're passion things because they show up in someone's life. So how does this dichotomous thinking
that's a good question.
play a role in your story?
I'll say theologically, it shows up in that I grew up in a theological system that really valued all or nothing in terms of the language of lost and saved, and really emphasizing a conversion experience as a necessity in the Christian journey. And so as going to Wheaton is not denominationally affiliated with anything. So there's a variety of Christian beliefs, evangelical, but within that, a variety. So I was surrounded by Christians who thought differently than each other, and that was good. And so then just learning to appreciate that some people see the spiritual journey more as a journey and less as a categorical change. For me, that was a really good advancement.
Lost and saved.
Lost and saved. If there's not a categorical change moment in your life that you can point to, then you're not right with God.
Yeah.
Whereas other people look at it as God loves us, and we're invited to participate in God's love for us, and our relationship with God grows over our lifetime. I mean, so that was that. I think because that categorical thinking about salvation, I saw how that really tripped up a lot of people. A lot of people would get stuck on that. Like, well, I don't know. Like, I've been in church my whole life and I can't point to a certain event. For me, I experienced, I think, several events through my childhood and teenage years. And it also tripped me up to go, well, that felt real back then, but I'm not sure. And there was so much just pointing people to, well, do you have assurance of your salvation? And if not, you're maybe not saved. There was so much sort of
like
cyclical thinking
Yeah.
where you're like, what am I anchoring any of this in? So I started to see my own spiritual development as a journey because I could see points along the way where I couldn't deny that something real was happening, but there was not one main point where things all shifted. So my own experience and my psychology understanding and being around other people with different theology than I grew up with all led me to value process and development above categorical change.
Yeah.
Just like a moment of change, this or that.
Yeah, there's a theological topic that I don't know if you want to go there, but
yeah, I do.
it's borrowed from the Eastern Orthodox
Yes.
kind of theology, from Orthodox theology. You want to talk about that?
Sure. So all of that groundwork was in progress in my mind when I started to learn a little more about Eastern Orthodox theology. I had some exposure to it before I even went to grad school and participated in some church experiences at an Orthodox church. But what I came to understand really changed how I think about humanity. So speaking of the garden story, I came to understand that Eastern Orthodoxy, and this is just a brief history lesson for people. So the Christian church began where the followers of Jesus were passing down traditions. The Catholic Church grew out of that, and the Orthodox Church, so there was a big split.
The Great Schism.
The Great Schism. 11th century. So disagreements about certain wording in creeds. There were it was all people trying to be faithful to how they understood God to be, but splits happening. So, all of theology is so embedded in history and language translations and all these things.
Yeah.
But so then you have Catholicism and this is broadly speaking, Catholicism and Eastern Orthodoxy. And that played out over time. The Reformation happened. We get Lutheranism. We get all these other things out of Catholicism. But Eastern Orthodoxy continued. And now what you have in the world is a lot of times it's sort of ethnically pocketed.
Yeah.
So you have Russian Orthodox, Greek Orthodox, all of that. Okay, background. That's the background. So Orthodoxy sees the creation story a little differently than what we've learned in the Western world. So what we tend to learn is God created humans perfectly. The fall happened, and we messed it all up. Mm-hmm. And then Jesus, it was incarnated and died and resurrected to fix it.
Yeah.
Eastern Orthodoxy says God created humans innocent with the innate potential for development. That development and growth is what we're born doing.
Which is innocent, different than perfect. And some people may understand like perfect in an innocent sense.
Yeah, but like perfect meaning complete.
Perfect, complete. Like there's nothing left to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So born innocent, but with the potential to grow into completion, to grow into perfection. And that what happened at the fall was not a categorical change from perfect to fallen, as much as it was a redirection of that growth away from growing into godness. It was a twisting of the direction of growth.
Yeah.
And so okay, so I hear that, I learned that, I'm like, whoa, that changes a lot of things.
Well, I was going to say, not to get too deep into the biblical narrative, but that certainly tracks then with what happens in Genesis 4, through 10, 11. It's everything, Tower of Babel, like, so where's people's growth? It's towards the self-aggrandizement of trying to, and why does God thwart them?
Yes.
In the Tower of Babel, is he
You're
threatened? Right. If you know that story, where is God threatened by human prowess? No, that's how some people would tell the story.
Right.
It's this redirection, like God trying to
like making major advancements in the wrong direction.
Right.
Yeah.
But to be like, if you keep going in this direction, this will be death for you.
Yeah.
Like let me help redirect you back.
Yes.
And kind of put up a roadblock for you so that you can eventually.
Right.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then I understand that and I go, okay, how do I size up whether I believe this to be true or not? How do I make sense of that kind of thinking theologically about creation? And my model, the thing I always run things past is Christology. All right, let's look at the life of Jesus then.
Yeah.
And see what's true of Jesus. Because if Jesus is the fullest version of humanity that we have to look at, then let's look at that and see how it plays out. So I go, okay, was Jesus born fully complete or innocent with potential to grow? Well, Scripture says he grew in several ways, right? Grew in wisdom, grew physically, grew in relationally, like in favor with people. Oh, okay. So if Jesus can grow,
yeah, it even says he grew in favor with God and men.
You're right.
So I mean,
so what is that all about?
Yeah, so he
as God, how do you grow in favor with God?
Beloved by God. Yeah, what does it look like in favor of God? Yeah. So definitely growth.
Yeah. So he wasn't plopped down as a fully complete 32-year-old, 33-year-old human baby. I mean, babies obviously have room to grow. So, okay. So if Jesus, the fullest example of humanity that we have, was born not yet complete, then yeah, maybe I would like to look at this theological construct over here and take it seriously. Oh, maybe humans innately are meant to grow and change and develop. And it's not so much about categorical perfect or fallen, lost or saved. Maybe it is more of, maybe development is built into what it means to be human, fully human. Yeah. And sin has nothing to do with it. Like even if, like with Jesus, the life of Jesus, even if sin's not part of the picture, that's part of what it means to be human, is to grow and to change.
I certainly hope so, for the reason of eternity. So I believe that I get to live forever, but a life forever of just completion,
sameness. Yeah.
Like, I mean, I think there'll be like some, the maybe it's the restoration of innocence, but like the longing in my heart, all those things that I'm trying, all the idols that I pick up in my life that I'm trying to make satisfy the thing that I'm actually longing for God. Like, I think that thing in me in eternity will be done away with. Like I'll have my origin, my source, my eyes trained in the right direction. But I certainly hope
that there's more and more.
That there's growth, there's, because I just think that's so much a part of not just the sinful human experience, but I think that's the story of the universe and what God is doing of change and growth forever, because living things grow. So how can I be alive but just be static?
Yeah.
So I think it's really powerful for me from a standpoint of, and I think that's why eternity's scary for people.
Yes.
People are like, oh, I just graduate and I got to live like that forever.
Right.
Oh,
like everything freezes in a certain...
Yeah, it's frozen. Which is rightfully terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe more for me than for some other people, but that sounds horrible to me, just to be frozen in.
Well, yeah, because what's the point of time if nothing's changing? Or, I mean, what is eternity? I guess this gets into bigger questions too, but what is eternity? It's outside of time.
Yeah.
Does change, is change possible outside of time? I mean, these are bigger questions.
Yeah.
But to bring it back to just the idea of humans growing, it's part of what I like about this church, being around here, is we emphasize change and growth. And I think it's not just because we're sinful people in need of restoration. It's because growth is what it means to be human.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's so encouraging. It changes the beginning point and it changes the end point. That it's not just that we're looking for restoration to the garden, like, a return to the perfection we had before. It's that we're looking for redemption to godness. And that would have happened even if sin hadn't happened. Like, that would have been the journey.
The work, yeah.
Yes.
Right, work existed before the fall.
Yeah.
So the work
part,
is not just tend the soil, but the work is.
Yes. Which will take us into another point I need to make about Orthodox theology that's helpful here in this discussion. But I think so often we kind of tend to think, oh, if I have stuff to work on, it means it's because I'm bad or it's because we're fallen people. And no, I'm saying even if that's not necessarily it. Of course,
Yeah.
we have sin and we have fallenness, but growing, maturing, developing, working on ourselves is not dependent on us having sin.
Yeah.
It's innate in who we are.
Well, and I love
what kind
that.
of creatures we are.
Yeah, I love that because otherwise I'm always trying to dig myself out of
Yes.
some hole that I've...
Like, I'm not there yet. What must be the problem that's still here? Always trying to introspect and always trying to dig something up.
And the motivation is then always from a place of guilt or shame or some sort of negative thing. What if I, like the best growth that I've had in my life is, or the richest, I think most, like, I don't know, legitimate or whole or healthy growth is not because I'm trying to get out of some bad situation or get out of trouble or fix something that's broken. It's like out of love. It's out of, it's out of something more positive.
Yes.
And
because
so
there's more for us than just a categorical, all right, we've arrived back at restoration to the garden condition.
Yeah.
There's more.
And man, Amy, I think I actually am hoping to have another guest on this podcast. She's an 80-some-year-old woman who just has this, I don't know if she would articulate it this way, but she just has this idea of like, she's always growing and she's getting closer to God, but she's never gonna get like, I got to God and now I'm done. It's just, she loves the journey of growing in her faith. And it's so beautiful to me because I see in so many other people, and even I think within myself sometimes, this tendency of going, I've gotten far enough, or I'm doing well enough. Yeah, my life isn't sinless, but I've gotten rid of the big stuff that's really problematic, and so now I've arrived.
Just kind of coasting, or
and I think that is so much more of our whether we'd articulate it as our narrative. That is the narrative of faith. You get to some point, and for some people, that point in our tradition here is 14-year-old confirmation. I've confirmed my faith. I got there. For other people, it's, when I have kids, I got to raise my kids, and once I raise my kids, then I've gotten
I've done
there.
my job.
And it's like, I know Jesus. I'm good. I'm going to go to heaven when I die, because I've gotten there. And I think that's so prevalent, and it's defining everything that we do. And not only is it so prevalent about this rival place, but it's often driven by this sense of defective, negative.
Right. Like we're just trying to work ourselves out of a deficit, and we feel like we've gotten there at some point, so it's good enough or something. And the sadness of that is that we're not realizing, or there's so much more. Yeah. It's just that we're forfeiting, we're missing out on the good stuff, or the best stuff, where there's more good to be had.
Yeah, and of course, I think the other interesting part of this is dichotomous thinking is what cut the church in the West off from this kind of theology. I mean, the reductionist argument about the Great Schism, amongst other things, had something to do with the filioque, and does the Holy Spirit proceed from the Father and the Son, or just the Father? Is the Spirit subordinate to the Son, or the Spirit is not subordinate also to the Son? And one group says yes, and one group says no, and we say you're wrong. You're anathema.
We can't. You're anathema. Okay, now go to your separate ways. Ooh.
And I'm sure, like anything, like in any split, I'm sure there's lots of issues, and I've read some other, stuff about the history of it. But you're wrong, and so then as a result, we in the Western theological tradition grow apart from something that was very Orthodox Christian. I mean, that was part essential to what it meant to be Christian, or a view that was kind of woven in there or accepted. We just become oblivious to it, and we develop in this whole other way, cut off from something that at its core is very ancient, faithful Christianity, because we said, who's right?
Right. Who's right?
This
who's
is
wrong?
This is wrong.
It's this or that.
And so that's really,
And then we get limited to just like one way of the Roman way of thinking was very different than the Greek way of thinking. And so you have these traditions rising up out of different cultures that had different strengths. And so then we limit ourselves to only one heritage instead of another way of thinking that also can be beautiful. And a couple other concepts out of that. Theosis is the term that is used in Orthodox theology that means becoming God. And so the term itself, of course, will strike a nerve with a lot of people in the West and go like, what in the, how blasphemous can you be? But really it's about that developmental process of becoming more and more like God. And in order to rightly understand that concept, you have to understand their understanding of God. What is divinity? So there's a distinction that they make in their, I don't know if we've talked about this.
I'm not sure.
There's a distinction that they make in their understanding of divinity. There's the energies of God and the essence of God. The essence of God is what is the God stuff that only God is, and that nothing else in creation will ever attain to, will ever be able to fully comprehend, will ever be able to access or touch. The energies of God is how...
like the Usia or something, I think.
Yeah. The energies of God is how God interacts with creation. And it is the part of God, the godness that we get to participate in. Yeah. And so the theosis doesn't mean you become God's essence, but it means you participate more and more fully in the energies of God. And when you understand that part, it doesn't sound as blasphemous. Because you're not saying you're trying to take over and be God.
Right.
But in a way, it just totally raises the ceiling of what are the limits here.
Yeah. Well, we talked this way about Christ-likeness. So I want to become more like Jesus. I want to attain to Christ-likeness. I don't think anyone's saying I want to attain to becoming the Savior of the world, the second person of the Trinity, but like we're essentially saying I want to become godlike.
Right.
You know, I want the process.
Right.
Of becoming
We just hesitate.
Like God.
We stop short of like I want to become God in the sense of I want to become the fullness of participating in the energies of God. I mean, the language, sounds weird to us, but we do speak that way, becoming more and more Christ-like. Yeah. And
we mean the attributes, like we're not necessarily referring to like I want my inner, I'm somehow, because like it's Mormon, it sounds Mormon or something.
Right.
Like someday I get to aspire to become my own divine being and populate my own planet or something. And that's not part of the Christian thing, is that I get to be a God.
Right.
That's not what we're trying to do here.
Right.
There's only one God.
Yeah. I think that understanding it this way, the whole debate about how is Jesus fully divine and fully human at the same time, and these things were hashed out for hundreds of years in the beginning of things. But it is hard to understand.
They labeled it pretty much everyone's definition as a heretic. I mean, like anytime anyone tried to define it.
What if it's like this? No, that's heresy.
No,
what about like this? That's heresy.
Yeah. Because it's hard to define.
It is hard to define. Right. So what if it's that, God took on human flesh, was really God, but not really? Or what if he just appeared to be human, but wasn't really? And it's like people propose these ways of figuring this out, and then people go, no, that doesn't honor the fullness of both natures. But when we understand God's essence and energies, that distinction, I think that eases that tension a whole lot, where you can go, oh, so Jesus was fully divine and fully human, and these things are not mutually exclusive. They can't be, because if we take Christology seriously, they can't be mutually exclusive, because they existed in the same person. And so how do they coexist? Well, maybe godness and humanness are not so categorically separate as we think that they are. They can't be if they existed in one person. And so my Christology is partly also what helps me to accept other types of theology that that checks out. That does check out. If I think that categorically divinity and humanity are so separate, well, then how could Jesus be fully human and in the same person? So,
which frankly is it's a problem with Roman Catholic theology, which went the other direction, because they get into this whole, how can Mary, a broken human, a sinful human, hold holiness and divinity? And then they go, well, maybe Mary was miraculously born and she didn't have this fallen divine nature, and everyone's trying to get their way. But like eventually,
How far back?
you
Yeah.
have to keep going until well, it's like a DNA test where you only get 1%, humanity or something. And I understand if that's your theological view, then you've got to reconcile that because humanity is sinful, it's opposed to divinity, and it cannot. So how can humanity literally hold divinity
Right.
in her womb? Well, you can't. You got to dance around that with a different understanding of what those things mean and how they interrelate. Suddenly, it's not a problem for a virgin to have divinity
Right.
and humanity in her womb.
Yeah, it changes a lot of things. And I mean, I think as you go, like once you start knowing that's an option to think that way, you start to go, oh, maybe it changes this. Maybe it changes that. Maybe. Yeah. So as a psychologist, I like that theology because it makes my work even more meaningful. That
Say more
my
about that.
profession doesn't exist just because we're sinful, just because we need to be restored to some starting point. It's like, no, helping people grow and mature is holy work, even if sin's not part of the picture. That's part of what we're meant to do, not just because we're bad, you know, but because of that's what it means to be fully human.
Yeah, so I can see how that changes people's perspective on why I should consider going to therapy. It's not necessarily because I'm so messed up that I need to shrink. It's kind of like the 80s.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it was thought of in the 80s. But I need to, I want to keep growing. I want to keep developing. And so this is a tool or a resource that can help me keep growing. Specifically, I'm curious about this dichotomous thinking. You said from a psychological standpoint, this is problematic for a lot of people. If you've also got that embedded in your theology, I'm just aware of how many people are talking about how they've been hurt by church, and not just by the actions of the church, but by some like theological, I would say misunderstandings, but maybe they were rightly understood the way they were taught. And what I have found, there probably have been seasons in my life as a Christian where misunderstanding the nature of God has been really detrimental for me because I didn't get it. As I continue to unpack theology, good theology is very life-giving. It's not something that's creating a bunch of tension or pain or crisis. It's actually giving a lot of life and peace, which is actually what the Bible says it's meant to do. So I'm curious about this dichotomous thinking, theological piece, or just the whole thing, and how, like, have you seen this play out to be more helpful for people, or trying to?
Oh,
Do you know what I'm saying?
You mean letting
I'm
go
trying
of
to bring-
categorical thinking being helpful?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of times when people get so hurt, I think it is, often people are trying to figure out who's the in group and who's the out group.
Yeah.
Or do you fit well enough in our community or in our congregation, or what do we accept as sinful versus not? And so I think a lot of hurts happen because of that. Maybe somebody gets labeled an outsider, or you're not in the right category to belong with us anymore, or you can only be in this thing if you fit all these categories.
Yeah.
And I think that's especially true with congregations who are not creedal people, who maybe say, well, I'm going to step on toes, but who maybe say like, Scripture's all you need. Well, okay, that's great, but it's so hard to interpret Scripture.
Yeah.
You're not reading the original languages, probably. You're not a scholar to, even scholars debate the meanings of things. So like, okay,
languages,
Scripture's all you need. So I think if people have, if a group of people has a common creed or something very specific that unites them, they have less of a need to define who's in and who's out, because there's a direction that they're going that pulls them together. Whereas if people don't have that, and it's just like up to your interpretation how you read this collection of texts, then I think people are more apt to come up with rules about, okay, well, we all belong together because we interpret things this way over here or that way over there. And you create more cohesiveness in a group if there's an out-group. If you have a common enemy or there's people who aren't in the group, it creates increased cohesiveness within the group. And so I think a lot of church hurts happen because of that. Because people are looking for something to hold their group together.
Yeah.
And they use an out-group to do that. And so I think that's one way that categorical thinking can really damage people.
Yeah, there's this whole, I won't get into it, but there's this whole distinction that I've read and used before about the difference between a communion and a community. And communion is some of what you're saying. It's more of that creedal thing, and it doesn't depend on the firm boundaries that a community needs of this is what defines in and out, and you need the scapegoats, you need the people outside to give your group definition. So that's if anyone's interested, they can look that stuff up and find some more about that, because I hear part of that.
Yeah, and I think this idea of growth development, that trajectory creates more of a scenario, less of like, okay, we're all here and we need to define who's out there and who's here, and it's more of a mental image of like, look, we're all going in that direction, we're going that way. And so come with us. But there's not like a stagnant, like we're in here and people are out there, who's in and who's out. It's like we're growing, we're developing, we're going in a certain direction toward godness, toward fuller godness. And then it's like, well, it doesn't even make sense to say who's the out group, who's the in group, because if you're all going the same direction, some people may be further along in the journey, but it's the direction that unites you.
Yeah.
And then there's no need to define who's out.
Yeah. I think we've talked about this before, that there are all these religious terms in the New Testament, righteous, holiness, godliness, and we all kind of, they're different words, but we all just treat them like they're the same stuff, like be good. And one of the ways that I think about godliness is not about anything that it doesn't reflect on your actions. It's really the direction of your heart, this Godwardness, to have a Godward directed life, and I think that's a much better measure of what it means to be godly than take an inventory of my life and inspect where there's sin or there's vice or whatever else in my life. That Godwardness is just like, you can look at my life and probably see lots of things that are confusing, and I'm confused by those too. The inclination of my heart, though, my direction really is, and it's imperfect, but for the most part, the direction of my life is toward God, and that's what it means to be godly.
Yes.
Not to have all my stuff together. Right
Behaviors all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Which, again, in Western theology, so much is about right behavior, which I think I would imagine you have to help people, you get to help people with undoing a lot of that or re-examining that, especially people of faith who have, because of this really strict, like good, bad, right, wrong, sinner, saint stuff, are pretty twisted up inside and are having a really hard time in life. How do you? Have you seen that? How do you help people with that? Like,
I don't know. The first thing that comes to mind is it is harder working on the mental health side of things. It's harder to help people get unstuck from that kind of thinking if their theology reinforces that kind of thinking.
Yeah.
So yeah, if somebody's coming from a place that's really valuing right and wrong, that kind of thing, then even introducing the idea on the mental health side of things of that way of thinking isn't always so helpful to you, that can be so threatening to their worldview that it takes patience and kindness and gentleness to invite them into something deeper. I'm not going to try to like bust up their categories. That feels like it would be harmful. But inviting them to think a little differently in a gentle kind of a way, I think is helpful. Yeah, I kind of lost sight of your question, I think. That was what first came to mind.
Yeah. No, I think it's right on. And maybe some of this is for me very prone to black and white thinking, and very self-critical, very perfectionistic. That's been my way. And I would say for the first 30 some years of my faith journey, some of my most profoundly feeling, like emotive, powerful religious experiences were actually over some huge sense of agony about how I had let God down and failed God for something in my life, and how could you love me? And this very like black and white, like I'm not lovable anymore, and I'm in all of this like shame and self-hatred, and then feeling or being reminded that God loves me even though I'm kind of a piece of garbage, and this relief that I would feel. But I realized that and that was a really powerful seemingly spiritual experience, because it was this roller coaster ride of huge emotion where I am unlovable, I'm unworthy, I'm terrible, I deserve nothing, like so much shame and self-hatred. Like, but then like in wallowing in that for a minute, which is really powerful. Those are powerful feelings, shame and self-hatred. And then feeling the rescue of God or the mercy of God, and really I thought it was, I don't know what I thought it was. I've come to understand that it really was just relief, that I would feel this extraordinary sense of relief.
Because the underlying thinking structure didn't necessarily change. It's just your mindset changed. Oh, I'm not bad, I'm good because God says I'm good, or because God's,
or he's
you
willing,
flipped from one category to another in your mind, maybe. Or do you think those experiences help to dissolve a little bit more, chip away at the
No, I think they entrenched it because it felt really spiritual. Like those moments felt really, really spiritual. And I said to my grandparents, they were part of a tradition that was very into altar calls, and and they may have their place at their church. It was a very emotive church, and there would be the same people when I go to church with them who would every altar call would be up there, and it was just kind of this shame and relief cycle, tearful going up to the altar because they had backslidden and feeling unlovable, and then feeling
rededicating
and so and I could tell those for them, those were really rich. Like, what is my faith if I don't have those lows and highs? And so for me, I think those moments entrenched for me, like they were so powerful. And just like any why are drugs addictive? Because they fill your brains with all these things, and it's such a powerful experience.
That relief feeling.
Yeah. And
keeps people coming back.
I wanted to keep coming back for it. And so then I almost felt like, you start for me, I started almost manufacturing those things, or getting more hypercritical about things in my life. So it wasn't the big sins that I really should feel a lot of shame about. I'd apply that same kind of
like scrutiny or something.
Scrutiny over smaller things, and be like, oh, but God, not only is this not one of the deadly sins, but you desire faithfulness in every way, and I've been unfaithful in this, and how can you love me? How can you love me? And I'm such a worm, I'm such a miserable thing, and then but Lord, you forgive me, like song or something, and it's just in tears, and that became this really euphoric spiritual experience that it was actually killing me. Like it was keeping me stuck in shame. It was keeping me embedded in this like confusing idea of like, does God love me or does he hate me? Am I despicable to him or does he delight in me? And I guess it depends on, how I lived this week or the moment or.
Right. So there's a cost to it, though. If you're if you want to give up categorical thinking, because there is a draw to it. The relief cycle brings you back and back.
Yeah.
And so there's a cost to that. You give it up. If you say, well, if you think of it more as a continuum or more of as a journey, or like you said years ago, I'm okay right where I am, even though there's further to go.
Yeah.
So if you think that way, you're necessarily giving up the relief part.
Yeah.
And that might be what the temptation in the garden was of, You want to know right and wrong. You want to know good and evil because it feels safe or it feels relieving or it feels good, but it's not ultimately the best thing for you to think that way all the time.
Yeah.
So I guess there's count the cost. If you want to grow and mature, you have to be willing to give up that euphoria, but maybe for the sake of hopping off the roller coaster and just having a more steady, gradual growth, wholeness.
Yeah, and for me, even as I identify areas in my life now that are without all the shame, I've gotten more to the point where I see things in my life as just like this isn't serving me well. This isn't bringing me towards wholeness or more towards God, and it's not serving my relationships well. And there's just a little bit more of like an even-tempered recognition, like a moment of clarity that's not necessarily tearful. It's not necessarily like filled with all this emotional remorse. It's this like enlightened experience of going, I don't know if this is serving me well anymore, or at all. And this isn't taking me in the direction I want to go. And Lord, help me with this. But it's not like this shameful, tearful thing. It's like, oh, you've helped me see something that could be different or something that's getting my way. And now I'm asking your help to help me change this because change is hard. And it's way less euphoric, but it feels like the difference between that high school, garbage can relationship you had with that person who was, it was breakups and it was passion and it was like it was so high and low, terrible relationship, like dysfunctional, unhealthy relationship, but somehow so powerful and euphoric versus, more like what I have after 25 years of marriage, which is a very stable relationship. And we have our ebbs and flows of closeness and distance, but it's a stable, consistent relationship that gives a lot of security and a lot of room for growth. And that's exactly what I would liken it to. But I wonder how many other people, because of their theology, because of some of this dichotomous thinking, are stuck in that up and down thing, partially because it feels good and partially because they don't have any other option. If they believe, if they want to believe in God, they think this is the way to do it.
Right, or maybe it's how we think about repentance, that repentance means to turn all the way around. Like maybe we think repentance means a complete 180, whereas maybe it means just like a little course correction. Change your direction, but it doesn't have to be extreme, but you're becoming more closely aligned in the direction of godness.
Yeah, I love that. James Clear in Atomic Habits talks about, just like a 1% change. If you're trying to change a habit or just 1%, like what it would look like just that incremental thing. Because he's like, if you do that enough, you'll be where you want to go, but going 100% doesn't work.
Right. And so I think there's room to even in that analogy of becoming rightly oriented toward God, toward growing into godness, there's room there for conversion experiences to make sense, because sometimes people's reorientation happens quickly. And for the journey type of spiritual development, that makes sense too, because maybe it's more of an incremental along the way. You're never at a point where you have to do a total 180. I think all of that can make sense. It's just like the speed with which you get, or the distance with which you get reoriented at once may look different.
Yeah. I've been questioning what you just said about conversion experiences, the quick ones. I've been questioning those lately because I think I've seen too many quick conversion experiences. I think Jesus maybe talked about this with the different kinds of seeds and the one that grows up fast.
Like
and
where it doesn't seem to stick.
It doesn't take root.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's 10 years later, it doesn't take root. But I do wonder so I've been like, I don't know if I believe, I wonder if that's all just smoke and mirrors or people are just not. But I wonder if maybe God does grab a hold of someone and reorient them, but this failure of understanding the rest of the work, that if it's lost or
so
found.
maybe the reorientation happens, but if the growth doesn't continue.
Right. And I think, oh no, I'm saved now. Like this is it.
Right.
I know Jesus and my life is better, but I don't bring in this other thing that you're talking about.
Right. And that might be where the whole life thing really is meaningful. Is it's not just a reorientation and then you're done. And also we have to also acknowledge that we are born into a sinful world. So even if one individual person gets that reorientation, they're doing the thing, we're still surrounded by systems and people who there's still hurts and there's hardship and it's hard stuff to deal with. So we're up against obstacles sometimes in that journey, I think, too, that might, if you don't have enough people around you that are going in the same direction, it might slow you down or stunt your growth or, something.
So as we're getting close to wrapping up here, I'm wondering, I can imagine that people are watching this or listening to this and they're thinking, is this specific issue or the specific way of thinking about this, something in my life, is this an example? Is this the thing that Dion and Amy are talking about right now? Is this dichotomous thinking? How do I identify it when it's happening in me? And how do I just identify faithful, orthodox? Like, are there any telltale signs of, either from a psychology perspective or a theological perspective, that like I maybe need to, that I'm falling into this dichotomous thinking and I maybe need to come up for air and re-examine that?
Yeah, I think from a mental health perspective, if you notice that you're anxious about something, I would check in and go like, oh, am I doing any all or nothing thinking about this? If somebody's totally freaked out because they have a final tomorrow and their mind is going like, if I don't do well on this, I'm never even going to have a career.
Yeah.
Like either I pass it and things are good or I fail it and everything's bad. That kind of thinking might be at play. Or if you're feeling like, or if you're stuck, in depression, this is common too, because you're like, you think all or nothing, things are all bad, or I can't do anything right, or everything in my life is wrong, or something like that. So I would say if you're having challenging, difficult moods or feelings, or your mind won't stop, check in with yourself and go, am I doing any of this? And if I am, what's an alternate way to think about it? And that's hard to do if you're not used to doing it. You might have to get somebody else to help you. And this is some of the practical stuff I do in session with people. I'm like, here's a 3-column chart. You're going to write down what's your automatic thought. You're going to label if there's some thinking error going on. And then in the 3rd column, we're going to come up with an alternative thought. So like, okay, maybe I fail a test, but that doesn't mean that my whole life is going to be ruined because of it, or something. There's not one right answer, but it's like something that's more middle ground, more realistic. And so that's part of the practical work that I get to do with people, is really starting to recognize the patterns of how you think and change them. I think this is, the renewing of your mind is sacred work, I feel like. And I get let into people's inner worlds, and it's the nitty gritty. And it's like, okay, here was your thought when you freaked out that day and you were panicking. Let's break it down and look at it, analyze it, step back and observe it, and develop your skills of thinking more flexibly.
Yeah.
And that's fun. That's freedom. It's like helping people find freedom and wholeness. And dichotomous thinking is just one of them. There's a bunch of different ways that you can think in a distorted way that can cause problems. And anyway, so I would say that could be a signal of like, if you're feeling extra anxious about something or extra stuck, check in with, what am I thinking? And is there any all or nothing thinking going on?
Yeah, I think it's especially true, again, of theology. So if there's something about your relationship with God or something about the Bible and it's filling you with this sense of dread or anxiety, I think sometimes we're like, oh, that's conviction. And it might be some conviction, but if it's filling you kind of with this unresolved, just like, I don't know if I'm okay, or I don't, like, that's probably a good idea, or probably a pretty good sign that there's something going on that's not maybe right theologically, that God wants us to feel a sense of reassurance and peace and drawn into him and to sense his delight and love and acceptance and grace. And if we're just kind of living in this prevalent spot of feeling anxious about that relationship or standing with him, that's also a thing. And by the way, you're absolutely right. Good therapists, and this is where therapists have been so helpful to me, you even as a friend have been helpful to me in this, is sometimes helping you see the thought that makes so much sense to you and just going, oh, wait, hold on. You say if this goes this way, then this is going to happen, or because this is true, then that is true.
Yeah, let's
Are you
just look
sure
at
about
that.
that? Like, and to go, I've had so many revelatory moments over things that I'm going, oh my gosh, I think you're right. That's not necessarily true, but in my mind, those things feel like they go together. That's it. It's if it's this, then it's that. It's cause and effect. That's it.
Right.
And so praise God for good therapists who help slow you down and go, wait a minute. Because that's been really transformative for me. Before we go, is there anything else you want to say that I didn't let you say that I overtalked to you about on dichotomous thinking?
I think I held my own pretty well. I don't know. Thanks for wearing black and white for this conversation, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know if you planned that.
Thought it would be very...
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. It's fun to talk about these things. There's not a great venue usually to just sit and really get to explore these topics that I think are very important. But so it's fun.
Yeah. Is there a good way that people, if you are a licensed counselor, therapist in practice, and if people are like, this is a woman who I think could help me with some stuff.
Sure.
I don't know if you're taking people or not.
Yeah, over the summer, probably not taking new people, but just because I got to manage time well. But in the fall, definitely looking for expanding my practice. My youngest will be in kindergarten, so I'm going to have more time.
Yeah.
My practice is named Clarity Psychological Services, and you can find me. I have a Psychology Today listing, Amy Pfeiffer.
Yeah.
Can find me there. So
because I get tons of requests from people, and do you know someone good? And for a lot of people, it's someone faith-filled who, because they're afraid of that. There may be some things that are helpful psychologically, but are they faithful from a biblical standpoint? And that's a big deal for me too.
Yeah.
Like I just don't want to resolve psychological stress I have to throw away deeper truths or convictions. And so it's good to know.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, thanks you, Amy. And for all of you viewing, watching, thanks for joining us for this episode of In Pursuit. If you want to know more about where you are in the whole life, and again, not to feel like you're doing anything bad, but if you want to know about some ways that you can grow, some opportunities to experience more of God's fullness for you, there is a free assessment available on our website, ippodcast.org. That's where you can find other episodes of this show. Meanwhile, if you like this, share it with someone else. Share the overall show with someone else, or this episode, or if this wasn't your thing, if this was way too deep for you and you made it this far, congratulations. Check out some other ones, and more important, keep pursuing a whole life.